so much, Allison and Sabrina. I appreciate you all sharing that song. And I've heard that song on the radio. I love the message of that song, of being willing to take our brokenness and share it honestly with each other. I think so many times we come to church and we hide all that stuff. We want to hide our struggles, hide our sadness, and paint a happy face, shake a few hands, and then get out of there, and no one ever knows what we're really going through. And I don't know about you, but I would love church to be an experience where we can be just real and share those struggles openly and be prayed for and not be condemned and be loved on and not jeered. That's what I envision. I happen to believe that's what God's plan was too. So maybe that was a good message for you to hear today, to just be real before the Lord. And I was thinking about this today. I want to ask you this question. Have you ever just been faced with a task that seems so insurmountable that you just don't even want to start? Don't even want to start, you know? And I'm not even thinking super deep right now. I'm not thinking of like a mountain of laundry. Like if you ever walked into your laundry room and they said, nah, you just shut the door and just go, like, nah, we'll do that another day. That's too crazy. Or maybe you're going to do, well, for me, the thing I keep thinking of is a little experience I had on Memorial Day. I saw my bride was pulling weeds out of the front landscaping, and we'd been doing some stuff, and I thought, I need to help, so I should help. So I went and joined her and got a shovel and said, okay, what are weeds, what are not weeds? And it was like, oh my goodness, because I can't tell the difference between real landscaping and weeds, unless it's got lots of flowers, then I can usually tell. And it turns out the vast majority of those plants in this landscaping were weeds. I'm like, wow. And Sherry and I have a little phrase we say to each other when we're trying to do something that's kind of big, it's a big project. We'll say, how do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time. One bite at a time. So you just got to take one little step at a time. But I'm here to tell you, as I was in that landscaping, I didn't want to eat no elephants. I didn't want to eat anything. I didn't want any part of those weeds. And they were horrible. And I remember at one point, I had gloves on, really nice work gloves, and I was having trouble getting one, and I thought, I'm going to two-hand this and pull that thing out. And I got thorns through, I mean, there weren't thorns on there. I didn't see any thorns. But as I squeezed it, I felt little needles all through my hands. I'm like, Adam and Eve, I do not like you right now. This is your fault. I've read Genesis chapter 3. It was all because of what they did in the garden. Now we have thorns and we have to labor in the garden and all that stuff. But we eventually got it done. It took a little time. And if you look at the whole project all at once, sometimes it can be overwhelming. You take one little step at a time, and eventually you can kind of get done. I could not imagine being a house flipper. You know what I'm talking about? People who will buy a house that's really run down, and they look at that and they see opportunity. I'll look at that and say, show me another house. I don't want anything to do with that house. But they see opportunity, they see what could be, and they'll buy that house probably at a good price, a decent price, and flip that house and turn it into something really good, really nice, and then either keep it or sell it for a greater profit. I couldn't imagine doing that. But when I look at the clutter that sometimes is just literally around me, I find I can get used to it. In fact, here's a point I want to make to you is this. Over time, we can really get used to just about anything. And maybe you know that's true. You know, for instance, smudges on windows. After a while, I'm so used to them, I expect them to be there, you know. French fries in your floorboard of your car, you know. They've been there a while. It's almost like they're expected to be there. They're part of the family, you know. Here's another one that I've come to realize. You can get used to just about anything, and that's a big problem because this is going to sound bad, but we get used to smells, right? So we need some really good friends to say, hey, dude, you may want to try new deodorant, right? Because you're used to your smell, but I'm not used to your smell, right? And that worries me a little bit sometimes because I think about that. I'm like, we just can get used to just about anything. Over time, we can get used to so many things. I can get used to a mountain of clean laundry that I'm used to it being there. I expect it to be there. That's where we go to find our clothes. We don't need dresser drawers. We can just go to the laundry pile, right? I get so used to weeds that They're beautiful, I don't know. We can get used to just about anything if we're not careful. The reason it's important for us to kind of know that is because, now I'm going to get spiritual on you, over time, we can get used to spiritual clutter. We can get used to the spiritual things around us that maybe we really don't desire or maybe shouldn't be there, but because they've been there, because it's been that way, we're used to it. Over time, we can get used to not reading the Bible. Over time, we can get used to not praying regularly. Over time, we can get used to not attending church. Over time, we can get used to not meeting in a small group. Over time, we can get used to not serving, not volunteering. And if you've never done those things before, over time, you can get used to never doing those things because you've never done them. We can get used to new bad habits. We can get used to gossiping. We can get used to having anger issues. We can get used to grudges that we hold. We can get used to habits that aren't good for us. Over time, any of those things can become so normal that they're a part of the spiritual house that we call home. Now, a similar thing happened to the nation of Israel. Israel, if you've read any of the Old Testament, they were God's chosen people. He had made a covenant with them, a contract with them, an agreement with them, and He was going to be their God, and they were going to be His people, and He was going to glorify Himself, reveal Himself to the entire world through Israel. However, they had a lot of issues. For all the awesome things that they saw from God, over time, they got used to spiritual clutter. Over time, they got used to their own disobedience. In fact, the book of the Bible we'll be looking in is the book of Judges. And I can sum up the book of Judges very quickly by saying, here's Israel obeying God, but over time, they disobey. And over time, they get used to the spiritual clutter that's in their lives, the disobedience that they live out. They get used to it over time, and God allows another nation to come and oppress them as a punishment. And that's how they exist for a while. But over time, God speaks to and calls out a leader, one leader known as a judge, to help open the eyes to the nation of Israel to the spiritual clutter that they have. And then they clean house. They actually declutter spiritually, and they actually start obeying God again, and God gives them victory over that country that had oppressed them. And then they're back where they started before. Sadly, they don't stay there. They go through that vicious cycle again. That's the whole book of Judges in the Old Testament. And we're going to look at a little part of it. We're going to look about a leader by the name of Gideon who helped Israel do something that perhaps you need to do as well, or I need to do as well. And that is this: flip your spiritual house. We may need to do that today. Now, you may take a step back and look at your life and look at where you are spiritually. And you may say, I just need to do a little dusting. Everything else is good. I don't know. Or you may take a step back and look and say, that spiritual house is a mess. Or it doesn't even exist. Or it's in ruins. I don't know. I don't know where you are. But I want you to hang with me for just a little while longer today as we look at this historical account of a man named Gideon. Now, we're going to be in Judges chapter 6. And in a moment, I'm going to start reading in verse 11. When I start reading there, you're going to hear about an encounter that Gideon had with the angel of the Lord. And it's a really unique passage we're going to look at. But I'm going to do a spoiler for you and tell you how this story ends. You probably have heard this before, some of you may. But basically, when God speaks to Gideon, Gideon agrees to be a leader and put things in action to begin to conquer the Midianites who were oppressing them. This group of Midianites were oppressing Israel. So God calls Gideon to defeat them. He agrees to do it. And let me stop there for a moment. He agrees to do it after a long time of thinking about it. He thought about it a long time. Have you ever heard the phrase, I'm going to put out a fleece about that? You may have heard that phrase before. Yeah, some of you have. You may have heard that. Putting out a fleece is kind of like when you ask God for a sign. Like, I've done that before. It's kind of silly to do that in some ways. But I don't know if you've ever done that, like you have a choice A and a choice B. and you wonder which one God wants you to do. They both seem like good ideas, but you're not sure which. So you do the most spiritual thing you can think of. You get a quarter, and you say, God, if it lands on heads, I'm going to do A. If it lands on B, I'm going to on tails, I'll do B. And you flip it, and it lands on heads, and you want to do, that means you're supposed to do A, but you really want to do B. So then you say, okay, best 2 out of 3, God. And you flip it again. I don't know if you've ever done that before. If not, I would not do that. Somebody else might, but I've never done that. But that's kind of what a fleece is, where you sort of ask for a sign. Gideon, for whatever reason, was torn about if this is really God asking him to really do this. Do you really want me to be a leader? Do you really want me to step up and do this? Maybe he looked at the Midianites and he saw this trashed spiritual house and said, how? This is insurmountable. How could you possibly want me to do this? Or how can I be a part of that? For whatever reason, he wasn't sure, so he kept putting out a fleece. He asked God for a sign. We'll read about the first sign he asked for in just a moment. But even after the passage I read, he does it again. He literally puts out a piece of fleece, a patch of wool, and puts it outside and says, God, if you really want me to do this, when the dew sets on the ground, let it only set on the wool, on the fleece, but the ground be dry. And God did that. And then he still wasn't sure, so he did it again and said, now this time, God, reverse it. Let's have the ground be wet and the wool dry. The opposite of what I said before. I don't know if I said that right or not. And God did that again. And so this Gideon, he struggled knowing what to do. And that's where we get putting out a fleece. But once he agreed to do it, he stepped up. He gathered a giant army. God ended up saying that's too big. He ended up narrowing it down to only 300 men. And not only that, he didn't arm them with swords. He didn't arm them with traditional weapons. They had trumpets and clay pots. And that's how they defeated the Midianites. I'm not going to tell you any more about that. You need to go home and have some homework. Read Judges chapter 7. It's awesome. It's epic. We're going to look in chapter 6, starting in verse 11 together. Here's what it says. The angel of the Lord came and sat down under the oak in Ophrah that belonged to Joash the Abiezrite, where his son Gideon was threshing wheat in a winepress to keep it from the Midianites. Don't miss that point. The Midianites were oppressing Israel, so they had to hide where they were threshing their wheat. Otherwise, if the Midianites came along, they would take their crops. So they were hiding to keep it from them. Verse 12, when the angel of the Lord appeared to Gideon, he said, the Lord is with you, mighty warrior. It's almost as if God said that to me. That's how Gideon's reaction was. I'd be like, first of all, mighty? I don't think so, God. It's neat how God told him what his purpose was before giving him any details. He gave him a vision for what he was going to do and who he was going to be and what role he was going to play in God's kingdom before it even happened. And I believe that God still does that today. And he wants to whisper in each of our ears and say, I got a plan for you. I got a purpose for you if you would just do things my way. If you would just follow me. And then here was Gideon's response. Pardon me, my Lord. Excuse me, Gideon replied. But if the Lord is with us, why has all this happened to us? Where are all his wonders that our ancestors told us about when they said, did not the Lord bring us up out of Egypt? But now the Lord has abandoned us and given us into the hand of Midian. The Lord turned to him and said, go in the strength you have and save Israel out of Midian's hand. Am I not sending you? Pardon me, my Lord, Gideon replied, but how can I save Israel? My clan is the weakest in Manasseh, and I am the least in my family. The Lord answered, I will be with you. And you will strike down all the Midianites, leaving none alive. Gideon replied, if now I have found favor in your eyes, give me a sign that it is really you talking to me. So here he goes with his signs. Please do not go away until I come back and bring my offering and set it before you. And the Lord said, I will wait until you return. Gideon went inside, prepared a young goat, and from an ephah of flour, he made bread without yeast. Putting the meat in a basket and its broth in a pot, he brought them out and offered them to him under the oak. The angel of God said to him, "Take the meat and the unleavened bread, place them on this rock, and pour out the broth." And Gideon did so. Then the angel of the Lord touched the meat and the unleavened bread with the tip of the staff that was in his hand. Fire flared from the rock, consuming the meat and the bread. The angel of the Lord disappeared. Like, that ought to be enough to say, okay, this is God talking to you, but of course later on he still does the whole fleece thing. But the angel of the Lord touched the offering with the staff, and fire literally come out of the rock and consume all of that offering. When Gideon realized it was the angel of the Lord, he exclaimed, "Alas, sovereign Lord, I have seen the angel of the Lord face to face." But the Lord said to him, "Peace, do not be afraid. You are not going to die." A lot of people believe, the Jews believed, if they were to actually see God, that it would kill them, because they couldn't even stand to be in the presence of God. So Gideon built an altar to the Lord there and called it "The Lord is Peace." To this day it stands in Ophrah of the Abiezrites. That same night the Lord said to him, "Take the second bull from your father's herd, the one 7 years old." Now listen to this, this is very important. "Tear down your father's altar to Baal and cut down the Asherah pole beside it." Let me just pause. You may have seen those words before if you've read any of the Old Testament. The word Baal is a very common word. It's the false god, kind of the chief false god of all the Canaanite people, all the people that lived in the promised land that Israel ended up coming into. This was kind of the little god of all the gods. And they believed that worshiping Baal would help them have success agriculturally. So here we have his own dad. Gideon's own dad had an altar built in honor of a false god named Baal. Now he also had the Asherah pole. Sometimes this would be a tree that they would literally just trim down to just be a pole, or they would erect a pole. And it was in honor of a fertility goddess. Once again, hoping that crops would do well, hoping their families would reproduce well. And that's why they did that. So the angel of the Lord is saying to Gideon, "I want you to tear them down. Then build a proper kind of altar to the Lord your God on the top of this height. Using the wood of the Asherah pole that you cut down, offer the second bull as a burnt offering." I just got to pause for a moment and say, that is so cool. Like, I want you to take this bad, awful thing, cut it up, and use it for me. Use it to make it an altar for me. I don't know, I think that's just pretty cool how he took something like that and did that. And then it says, "So Gideon took 10 of his servants and did as the Lord told him." Step of obedience. But because he was afraid of his family and the townspeople, he did it at night rather than in the daytime. And he was scared. This is his dad's altar that he built. And they all believed to some extent that this pole and this altar was going to help us have prosperity. He was taking it down. He was bulldozing it. Of course, he did it at night. And he had accomplices. That probably made him feel better too. In the morning, when the people of the town got up, there was Baal's altar, demolished, with the Asherah pole beside it, cut down, and the second bull sacrificed on the newly built altar. They asked each other, "Who did this?" When they carefully investigated, they were told Gideon, son of Joash, did it. The people of the town demanded of Joash, "Bring out your son. He must die, because he has broken down Baal's altar and cut down the Asherah pole beside it." But Joash replied to the hostile crowd around him, "Are you going to plead Baal's cause? Are you trying to save him? Whoever fights for him shall be put to death by morning. If Baal is really a god, he can defend himself when someone breaks down his altar." Which I thought was pretty cool, because he built that altar, so he's kind of defending his son. I hope he had this eye-opening moment where he realized this needs to happen. So because Gideon broke down Baal's altar, they gave him the name Jerub-Baal that day, saying, "Let Baal contend with him." He got a new nickname, which means Baal's going to fight you, is what you did. Now all the Midianites, Amalekites, and other eastern peoples joined forces and crossed over the Jordan and camped in the valley of Jezreel. So all these armies that are against Israel, they've gathered. Then the Spirit of the Lord came on Gideon, and he blew a trumpet, summoning the Abiezrites to follow him. He sent messengers throughout Manasseh, calling them to arms, and also into Asher, Zebulun, and Naphtali, so that they too went up to meet him. He started gathering his army. One bite of the elephant at a time, one little step at a time, the house was beginning to flip. That's what we have to do, friends. Sometimes we've got to flip our house by doing a little bulldozing, just like Gideon did, when he literally demolished an altar that was put in place in honor of a false god. I want to go back. Gideon asked a question. The first thing he said to that angel was, "Where's God been?" I hear all these stories about the Red Sea parting, God feeding the Israelites in the wilderness with manna, with quail, all the mighty wonders, the plagues that attacked the enemy of Egypt and caused us to be able to escape. We know all these stories, but where is that now is basically what Gideon was saying. Where's God been? And you know what the angel basically said back to him? I've been here. Where have you been? That's what he's saying. His first thing he told him to do was, I want you to worship me. I want you, now, here's your first step. I'm going to deliver the Midianites away out of Israel. I'm going to deliver them into your hands. You're going to defeat them. But before you do that, here's what I want you to do. I want you to clean house. I'm still here. And I will help you do this. I've not moved, but you all are the ones who moved. What a powerful reminder that we can get used to anything over time. And that's exactly what Israel did. They've gotten used to this same nation who worshiped the one true God, who had crossed over the Red Sea on dry land miraculously, had found themselves worshiping gods that don't even exist. And they've gotten used to it. Used to it to the point that they were ready to lynch Gideon for doing that. They were ready to get him out of there. They were ready to kill him. And yet, God had a different plan. He wanted to flip that spiritual house. He wanted to do something amazing in them and through them. And friends, I would tell you the same thing today. He wants to do that in your life. But in order for him to do that in your life, there's something you've got to know. You've got to know that King Jesus does not share his throne. He will not do it. King Jesus doesn't share his throne. There's only one reservation for the throne of your life, for the throne of your heart, and it's got Jesus' name on it. You can put other things on there, you can put other people on there, but it will not work ever. It will not pan out. And you can look at Israel, the whole book of Judges, to the story, and then putting something else, someone else on the throne, their spiritual throne, and the result of that was destruction. The result of that was problems. The result of that was trouble. Now, I'm not saying that, if you have Jesus as your king, that you'll never have any trouble. But I will say this, when that trouble comes, he will walk with you through it. He will carry you through it. He will never leave you. He will never forsake you. I'm here to tell you, if you take a step back in your life and you say, where am I spiritually? And you look and you can see weeds have sprung up and you can see there's clutter all around and it's not where it needs to be. And it may seem insurmountable. It may seem like a mighty big task. I'm here to tell you, God is greater. He is big enough to flip that house. He will give you stuff to do it. He won't just snap a finger and boom, everything is just great the way you always hoped it would be. In fact, it's not, he doesn't want to get your life the way you want it to be. He wants to get your life the way he wants it to be. The Israelites seemed perfectly okay with their new normal. They'd gotten used to being oppressed by the Midianites and worshiping Baal and Asherah. Gotten used to it. That's their normal. And finally, someone started listening to God and saying, this isn't normal. This isn't God's plan. This is not what he wants for us. It's time to flip this house. And it took a little coaxing by God. And it'll probably take a little coaxing by God in your life too. He doesn't give up. He'll keep whispering. He'll keep knocking on the door of your heart saying, okay, I've got stuff for you to do. Take a step. King Jesus doesn't share his throne. So maybe the first room in the house we need to be cleaning out is the throne room. What are we worshiping? What does your world revolve around? What is the most important thing in your life? It's a big question to ask. And if you haven't come to a point where Jesus is Lord of your life, where He's the center of your universe, where you spend each day wondering what it is He wants you to do. What is His direction for me today? What's His purpose for me today? How does He want to use me today? How can I worship Him today? How can I shine His light to others today? How can I show His love to others today? If we're not there, and probably most of us aren't exactly there, we need to be taking steps to get there and letting God flip our spiritual house. Jesus does not share His throne. And if you're sitting there saying, that don't make sense, that don't sound like a very nice God. He seems like got to share the stage a little bit. Well, let me just give you a little history lesson. All the way back in the book of Exodus, we have this little thing called the Ten Commandments that God gave us. I want to read you the first 6 verses of that chapter as He's introducing the Ten Commandments. It says, and God spoke all these words. I am the Lord your God who brought you out of Egypt, out of the land of slavery. And here's the first of the Ten Commandments. You shall have no other gods, little g, before me. And here's the second commandment. You shall not make for yourself an image in the form of anything in heaven above, or on the earth beneath, or in the waters below. You shall not bow down to them or worship them, for I, the Lord your God, am a jealous God, punishing the children for the sin of the parents to the 3rd and 4th generation of those who hate me, but showing love to 1,000 generations of those who love me and keep my commandments. Make no mistake about it. God is serious about this. He will not share His throne with any other false god we would want to put in our lives and place. A lot of people think that jealousy is a bad thing. Jealousy is a normal thing. It really is. Now, some of us have jealousy issues, perhaps. I like to think of the emotions we feel as the alarm systems that God created us with. If your alarm system goes off a lot and often and in a big way, you might want to get the alarm system checked. But it's normal and natural to sometimes experience jealousy. Why? Because the Bible says we were created in the very image of God. And He is a jealous God. That's why if all of a sudden Sherry tells me, you know what? While you're going on that mission trip, got me another husband. Hope you don't mind. Didn't think you'd mind sharing that. And if I were like, cool, that's great. There's something wrong with me. I shouldn't be jealous. I'm not supposed to share that. And the same is true. God does not want to share lordship in your heart at all. Why? Because there's only one God and it's Him. And why? He made you. Why would He want to share that with anybody else? He formed you exactly the way He wanted you to be. And He has a plan for you. That's why you don't want to let go. He's got a purpose for your life. Jesus talked about this too in Luke 16:13. No one can serve 2 masters. Either you will hate the one and love the other, or you will be devoted to the one and despise the other. And in this example, He says you cannot serve both God and money. It was a real big problem back there in the 1st century. I don't think we have that issue, money, materialism, fame, power. I don't think we have that today, do we? I don't know. We cannot serve 2 masters. Jesus taught that. And then here in Matthew 13 it says, when Jesus had finished these parables, He moved on from there. Coming to His hometown, He began teaching the people in their synagogue, and they were amazed. Where did this man get this wisdom and these miraculous powers? They asked. Now here's where it turns weird. Isn't this the carpenter's son? I almost hear it in my Harlan County friends and family dialect. Ain't that Joseph's boy? That's Joseph's boy over there. Isn't that Mary's boy? Isn't his mother's name Mary? Aren't his brothers James, Joseph, Simon, and Judas? Aren't all his sisters with us? Where then did this man get all these things? And they took offense at Him. But Jesus said to them, a prophet is not without honor except in his own town and in his own home. Famous saying that Jesus said. In other words, a prophet is honored everywhere, but in his own family, in his own home. Why? Because they remember when he was a little runt running around, you know. They saw him grow up, but like, oh, that's just Joseph's boy. They dismissed Jesus so quickly. But here, the reason I read this to you is because of this last statement. And he did not do many miracles there because of their lack of faith. I wonder if our spiritual house is left in ruins or left at least cluttered because we have stopped believing. We have stopped allowing Jesus to be on the throne of our hearts and expecting him to do great things. We have settled for the normal that we have. Oh, this is just the way it is that we're used to. These spiritual weeds, this stuff, this junk, my habits, it's just the way it is. It's my normal. Friends, I'm hoping you will hear today that God doesn't want to leave you with a spiritual cluttered house. He wants to flip your house. He's going to give you something to do that. Jesus doesn't share his throne. Let's clean the throne room together today. I want to sort of think out loud with you what maybe your next steps might be. As you think about flipping your spiritual house, where do you even start? What is the first bite of the elephant maybe you need to take today? The first one would be this: to invite Jesus to take up residence in your house. Maybe he's not in the throne room at all because you've never let him in the house to begin with. That's that first step of faith that we talk often about. Having that moment where you finally say, I recognize that Jesus is real, that he died on the cross for me, and that if I believe in him, he will give me eternal life. It's beginning a new relationship. It's actually asking the architect of your house to come in and say, I can fix this if you'll let me in. In the book of Revelation, there's this beautiful verse where Jesus says, Behold, I stand at the door and knock. And he who lets me in, I will come in and I will dine with him. And friends, perhaps where you're sitting today, where you've been today, where you've been in your life, you've been sensing the knocking of the door of your heart coming from God. Maybe it's time you say, come in. Come in, Jesus. I want you in my heart. I want you in my life. Maybe that's your first step today. Maybe you've done that already. But maybe your next step is to just simply pray and ask God to show you one thing in your life that needs bulldozed. What is your altar to the false god that's in your life? What is the thing sitting on the throne of your life? And sometimes it's not that. Sometimes we have Jesus on the throne, but we got this other thing in our life that's cluttering it all up. What is that? God wants to bulldoze it down. He wants to cut it down in your life. He's going to ask you to be the one that does it. He asked Gideon to do it. It's your choice to tear down the things that are between you and God. Will you do that today? One last thing that might be what God would have you do today. He may ask you to ask friends for help. One of the little details you may have missed in Gideon's story is that when he decided he was going to bulldoze down the altar and the pole, he got 10 friends to help him do it. And that reminds me that sometimes we may look at our spiritual house and know there needs to be some work done, but we can't do it by ourselves. And that's okay. Invite someone in. People you know who also believe in Jesus and have him on the throne of their lives. They'll come alongside you and help you. Pray for you. Keep you accountable. It's one of the reasons why we do small groups here is because we need people to help us. Maybe your next step spiritually today is to say, God, show me who I can reach out to ask them to help me declutter my life spiritually. To help me overcome this addiction. To help me to overcome this sin problem. To help me to start doing what God wants me to do. To start reading the Bible. To start attending church more frequently. To get in a group. To start showing people love. Instead of just thinking about myself all the time. Or What is it that God wants you to do? What is your next step to start flipping your spiritual house? Let me tell you this. Whatever that next step is, you don't do it alone. Christ will do it with you because He is greater. He is stronger. He can do it. I want to pray. After I pray, we're going to sing a worship song together. While we're worshiping together, I'll be sitting down, standing down front here worshiping also. But maybe you know there's a decision you need to make today, and you just need someone to help you with that decision. I invite you to just slip out and come. I'd love to pray with you and talk with you about that. You don't have to do that to make a decision for the Lord today. Right where you are, you can pray and take the next step. I invite you to do that now as I pray. Father, we come before you, realizing that there's times in our lives when we're cluttered spiritually. There might be someone in this room that has never invited you into the house anyway, in the very first place. Father, I pray that right now they would courageously and boldly talk to you right now and say, Jesus, come on in. Come on into my life. Come on into my heart. I need you and I want you. Forgive me of my sins and be my Savior. Father, I pray that if someone were to pray that right now, that you would help them to know by that step of faith, they are now your child forever. They will spend eternity with you. They'll begin to experience a transformation that only you can have. Father, there may be those who realize that there's stuff around them that needs torn down. Father, I pray you would help them to see what their next step is. What is it that needs to be torn down? What's their next step? Father, if there's someone they need to ask to help them, reveal that to us today as well. Help us to see what we need to tear down and to get help to do that. Father, have your way with us as we put you back on the throne of our lives. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.